This is a tutorial about installing OpenSense, the OpenSense firewall in VMware. And you can do it in Fusion or Workstation Pro. It doesn't matter which one. It has to be a Pro version. Now, OpenSense is a firewall product that runs on an operating system platform. So this is inside FreeBSD, and we're going to install this in a virtual machine. So this is going to be inside a VM. And the reason we want to do this is to test, this is going to be for students to test how OpenSense works. Now we have a global network over here, and it could be a home network or it could be a lab network. And in my example here, it is 192.168.0.x. The 24-bit, and inside here I've got a machine which is going to be my host for this. Now this will represent our inside connection, and I have my host machine is .5 on this network. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple NICs on our OpenSense box, one that is bridged on this network, so it will have a network card that works on here, and we can put, I'm going to assign a static IP on here, and I'm going to assign 150, and then I'm going to need an inside network, and I'm going to build another virtual machine here. I'm going to do all this example in OS 10, so this will be Apple's OS 10, and this VM will be OS 10, but you can use any operating system. Obviously Windows or Linux would work. Now this network here, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick 10.1.1.x, going to be a 24-bit mask, and so we'll need to create a virtual machine with a NIC here and a NIC here in OpenSense that will work. Now, OpenSense defines two sides of its firewall. This is going to be defined as the WAN side, and this is the LAN side. And you can have multiple LANs, and you could number them LAN 1, 2, 3. But this is the setup that we're going to show how to install. First, we'll go to OpenSense.org. So we're going to get the product from. We're going to click on download. We're going to get it from a mirror that's closest to us, and we'll see that there's a bunch of options here. The easiest one to install, which is bootable by VMware, is the ISO CD-ROM version. So you're going to download the CD-ROM AMD 64. We want the 64-bit if we can get it .iso. So download that and have that on your desktop. Now when I first set this up and install it, I'm only going to install the WAN interface just to get that to work and to make sure I know which interface is the WAN and which one is the LAN. Now as I say, I do this in OS 10, but you can do it in Workstation. We're simply going to add a new virtual machine. Now here I'm going to install from a disk or image, and you need to point to where the disk image is. I happen to know where mine is, and I can just drag it in here. And continue. I might want to customize the settings. There's not much memory in there, so if I customize the setting, and I'll call this OpenSense 2 because I already have a OpenSense, and it will allow me to set some of the parameters. For instance, I might want a little more memory. I'll give it a gig of memory. And maybe the hard drive is 20 gigs. I could bump that up to 30. Well, I should not need that much. As far as the network adapter goes, I want to have a bridge networking. So there is a network adapter. Right now it's using NAT. I want that to share. This is my host IP address. And now what I can do is I'll start up OpenSense. And one of the things that will happen is near the end of it, it will ask you for an install. The CD-ROM is a live CD. It just boots from the CD-ROM. And on my machine, it didn't pause to give me an install option. At the very end, you can hit I to get an install option. And I hit the I key just before the end of the install. So we'll start this up. This will automatically choose the multi-boot option there. And as it goes, and it goes pretty quick, when it gets near the end, I start to hit the I option. You'll have to click inside the VM. And if you do that, it will now bring you up to the OpenSense installer. Now, it's sometimes hard to get this OpenSense installer. You can't see it, and I don't know the command to bring it up, but it is hitting an I option on the keyboard just before that installation finishes. Otherwise, it won't install on the hard disk. It just runs from the ISO image, and if you move the ISO image, it won't start up. So we want to install this. We just hit enter. We'll accept all those settings. Guided install. We're going to install here on the hard drive that it's found. And GPT UEFI mode is fine, and away it goes. Finally, we'll reboot. Pause to start manual interface assignment. I just let that time out and it will continue on. It'll start a web GUI for us to use. Now the login is root and OpenSense, OPNsense. That will bring up a menu that you see there. Now the first thing is to assign interface. So we only have one interface. We see EM0 there. Do you want to set up VLANs? No, we don't want VLANs. But enter the WAN interface name. We're just going to call that WAN, WAN. So we're going to give that the name for EM0. Oh, sorry. I've used that name before. Let's try WAN1. The first task is to assign the interface, the WAN interface, so we'll choose one. Don't worry that you see LAN on top of EM0. We're going to assign that to the WAN interface. We don't want to set up VLANs. We'll hit no there. Enter the WAN interface. So that's going to be EM0. There's no LAN interface at this time. So our WAN is EM0. Do you want to proceed? Yes. And then we want to assign an IP address to it. So we're now going to choose 2. You'll notice at the top it's WAM EM0, which is the first network card. EM is the standard for FreeBSD. Notice it's using DHCP. We want to assign an address there. It's picked one up from the DHCP on my local network, but I'm going to assign something outside that range. Configure IP version 4 via DHCP. No, we don't want to do that. So the WAN IP address should be 192.168.0.150. It's a 24-bit mask. The gateway is 192.168.0.1. I don't want to configure IP version 6. I do not want a DHCP server on my WAN. I already have one on my local network. I don't want OpenSense to also do that. I want to use HTTP as the web GUI protocol, yeah. And if we get out, we should have, it should have shown that up there. But what is often a good thing to do is to power off my system just to make sure everything's working. And I want to disable my CD-ROM to make sure it's booting from the hard drive. Powered off. I can disable my CD-ROM. I don't want to connect that so it doesn't boot from it. We're going to power it up again, and then we're going to try to connect to it from, I'll just minimize this. And so what we've done is we've connected in from OpenSense just this part of our network now, and I'm going to try to connect into OpenSense from the WAN for the web interface. Now this is not standard. Typically you cannot connect into OpenSense from a WAN side. It's normally blocked. But if you only have one adapter, it does allow you to do this, just so it doesn't lock you out from the web GUI, because that's really the only way that we're going to configure OpenSense. They don't seem to publish the command line, all the command line tools. This up. So at this point we've powered up and we've logged in as a root user. And on my host machine I've brought up a browser, and you can notice here that we've gone to 192.168.0.150, which is the address which I've specified, and up pops the OpenSense GUI, and I can put root in OpenSense. The very first thing you want to do if you were doing this in production would be to change all built-in accounts. The root account, I think there's an install account, anything that comes standard with the OpenSense password, you want to make sure you change that so that no one can hack into your machine using these default accounts. And what you'll see is there's a dashboard, and which gives you some status, and you can change passwords, some information on logging out. These are where the firewall rules are and the various interfaces. So we'll look at some of the configuration of this in just a sec. But next what we need to do is create our LAN interface. I'll log out of OpenSense here. And what we're going to do is we're going to shut down OpenSense and install a new network card. So OpenSense is shut down. I'm going to add a device, a network adapter, and I'm going to add this to VMNet3 because this is a private network. Although it says this, there's no IP configuration. It's totally a private network. We can see generate a MAC address for this so we can prove it. It's got 3 at the end. And then we're going to power up OpenSense. And it will find this interface. Notice as it's powering up, it's found our WAN interface there, 192.168.0.150. We're going to log in with root, and we'll get back here. Now at this point, we can still log in on our host machine to 192.150. We can go to the GUI under assignments, and it will recognize a new interface, but it's not assigned to LAN or WAN. So we're going to hit the plus sign here. That is going to be our LAN interface. That's going to be assigned. And we want to enable that interface, but we want to give it an IP address. So if we click on the LAN here at the left now, we enable the interface. The description is LAN. Thing you might question here, block B-O-G-O-N, Bogon networks. What is that? Those are private networks that don't have public IP addresses. For instance, they might be 172, they might be 10 networks, 192.168. Those are all private IP address ranges which don't work globally on the public internet. So you can block those if you want, and those could cause some issues that we'll take a look at in a second. What we're going to do right now is just set this to static. The IP address we're going to assign is 10.1.1.1, and we're going to give it a 24-bit mask for this network. We don't need an upstream gateway for this interface. We're just going to save this. We'll apply a change. Sometimes you need to hit the save button underneath here. What you should see if you go back to the interface here, if we just hit enter, we'll see at the top that we now have LAN and WAN both listed with IP addresses. It often is a good idea to reboot your system, so we'll do that. When we reboot, we see our LAN is set up with an IP address, our WAN is set up. But now what we'll notice is that if I try to connect to that same address on the WAN side, I cannot connect, and that's because by default the WAN is not supposed to be able to manage OpenSense, and that's typical. You do not want people from the internet side to be able to get at your web interface in any way, be able to hack in and change your firewall settings. That's certainly a huge security issue. What to do here? Well, I do have an OS X OS here. I'm going to add a network card to that that's going to be on this network. We're going to show that we can manage this from the LAN side. So this is my OS X virtual machine, which I built some time before. That may take you half an hour to build, or some VM. And the network adapter is also set to VMNet3, that private network. So I'm going to start that up and allow it to boot. This has booted up, and I've configured this to manually, for the only network card, the only Ethernet card that's in the virtual machine, to statically have 1.2 as the IP address, the subnet mask, and the routers here. Now the OS X virtual machine we've just installed is inside this 10.1 network. It's right here. We'll find that by default you can manage OpenSense from a LAN side, and we'll prove that here by bringing our virtual machine here, which is inside, and we'll just connect to 10.1.1.1, which is the OpenSense network adapter. And you'll find it will bring up the OpenSense GUI, and if I put in the password, the correct password, I can log in. So this shows you can manage it from the LAN side. We want to make changes to manage it from the WAN side. Now our firewall is all controlled by the firewall section, or a set of rules. And if we click on firewall and we click on rules, we'll see a window that has 3 tabs here: our WAN interface, our LAN interface. And by default, everything is blocked. Okay, let's bring up our firewall again, and let's see if we can change this problem that we have on the WAN side, and not really a problem. This is just because it's a LAN environment, and from the host machine we might want to manage this. You wouldn't typically do this in production, so these are not changes that you do from production, but they illustrate some of the basic rules that we want to be able to change. So from the WAN side, one thing you can notice is it's going to block all these private networks, bogon networks. So I'm just going to change that configuration so that I uncheck that here. And if I go down, I'll want to save that. Apply changes. I can go back to the rules. There are my firewall rules here. And on the WAN, we'll see that there's no rules. That was the only rule there. We want to add a rule that was going to allow HTTP access. So let's look at our diagram again. We've got OpenSense up and running. So what we have now is on our virtual machine, I can get in and manage OpenSense, and that is typically what I'll want to do. I typically want to do that on this LAN side. If I want to enable in the WAN side, I have to add a rule so that the firewall allows HTTP access into this WAN side, which is basically TCP port 80. Going back to OpenSense, we'll go to the firewall. We'll choose the WAN side. We want to add a rule. The protocol should be applied to TCP port, and if we wanted both, we could choose TCP/UDPs, but typically choose TCP. Those are the most common ports. Source can be anything. I can have a single host or network, and I could choose which host. So if I just wanted one machine, and this is a single host would be a 32-bit because I'm using IP version 4. The destination port, let's scroll this down a bit. It should be HTTP. That's what I want to allow. If I start to type H, you'll see it from a list here. And if I get to the bottom, I can see that I just want to save this, and then I want to apply this change so this rule gets into effect. Now, I should have then allowed that port into the firewall. So on my host machine, I'm going to bring up my browser again, and I'm going to apply that IP address, and we can see that we can log in now from the WAN side. So what we've done here is we've just done a very basic install of OpenSense on FreeBSD. We've added a couple NICs in VMware. We've added this private network. We have the WAN side set up here. I can manage from the WAN side or the LAN side. And this can be used to test OpenSense for firewall rules and to learn more about how the OpenSense firewall works.